Thanks for joining me on this episode of Tropical Weather Impact. It is Wednesday, October the 29th, as we continue to track what is left of over Hurricane Melissa. It is still a hurricane, still causing big problems around Cuba and now into the Southern Bahamas. But you'll notice right off the bat, this storm has really taken a beating over the past 12 hours or so as it did cross over Cuba. Dumped a lot of rain, winds gusted over 100 miles an hour, and now it's got its sights set on the Bahamas. The good news is the intensity, it's Cat 2. It's no longer a Category 3, 4, certainly not a 5 at this point. Pressure's way on up there, too, at 968. Also notice it's doubled its speed since yesterday. It was moving at 7 miles an hour. At one point now it's at 14, and so this will continue to be the trend as this passes over the Bahamas as still an impactful hurricane. It's not nearly as strong as it was, but still taking it very seriously for some of these areas and these islands in the Southern Bahamas. A closer look, you can see the center is going to be right in, well, wait for it to advance here. That's where the center is going to be. And we may see it try to reorganize some as it moves over these warm waters of the Atlantic, but it's not expected to regain that structure like it had yesterday with that historic landfall in Jamaica. Let's talk about the path of this and where it's headed. You can see there the hurricane moving through the Southern Bahamas throughout the remainder of today. By tonight, things will start to improve, and once we get into Thursday, we're not done with it impacting maybe some areas. Bermuda are needing to watch this. They could have a Category 2 on their doorstep by Thursday night, producing strong winds you can see there, and then eventually it would move further out to sea, and thank goodness we'll be gone and done with Melissa. This is what Melissa's doing this morning. Winds are still gusty and tropical storm force over Cuba, but things will improve in Cuba here over the coming hours. Things are not improving. They're deteriorating here in the Southern Bahamas. There's Duncantown, Clarencetown, Snug Corner, just a few locations we've drawn on here to show you how the strong winds could be passing through. And we could still have wind gusts over 100 miles an hour around that eye wall of what's left over Melissa as it passes through those areas. Then as we go out in time, you can see there the structure of the storm. While it's not necessarily getting stronger and stronger, the wind field is growing in nature, and this is why Bermuda is probably going to have some wind and wave impact from this as we go into Thursday night. You can see that they're passing north of Bermuda, but producing tropical storm, nearly hurricane force wind gusts into Thursday afternoon and Thursday night for Bermuda. Let's talk about the historic nature of this storm. Went back and looked at the data, and where we stand right now is Melissa is tied for the strongest landfalling hurricane in the Atlantic Basin. And that's based off of two things: the wind speed at landfall and the pressure at landfall. Remember, the lower the pressure in a hurricane typically corresponds to a stronger hurricane. Pressure of 892 is an extreme rare territory here for a hurricane, especially in the Atlantic Basin. And so Melissa is tied right now with the Labor Day hurricane that happened back in 1935. Also tied with the winds of Dorian back in 2019. That was Dorian. That was the Labor Day hurricane. That is where Melissa made landfall in Jamaica yesterday. So it really is a historic storm. And those are preliminary numbers. The Hurricane Center will go back in time and reanalyze the data to see if the numbers need to be tweaked up or down with Melissa, and that usually happens either in the late winter or in this case it'll probably be sometime as we get into the spring. Where are we at in hurricane season? Well, we're about done in a sense of when you look at the history and climatology of it all, but it's been a really interesting hurricane season. We've had three Category 5s, 4 major. It is very rare to get 3 major hurricanes or 3 Category 5 hurricanes. That's only ever happened one of the season, and that was in 2005. And so while here on the northern Gulf Coast we have not had any problems, we've not had a named storm, we're to that point where bad hurricanes, we're done with anything like that in the New Orleans area. We can occasionally get some weaker systems that are rainmakers and tropical storms and hybrid systems, but at this point we're typically done with anything bad in the New Orleans or in the Texas area. Florida still watches things later in the season, the Caribbean islands obviously, and even the East Coast, but typically by this point in the New Orleans area we're doing fine. Speaking of doing fine and maybe a late season storm, we're going to be watching something this weekend. Now let's start by saying this is not really tropical in nature, but an area of low pressure may try to form in the northern or central Gulf this weekend. We have a storm system coming down, another cool front, And this time of year, we get these fronts and they'll stall out over the northern Gulf. You get a lot of disturbed weather and you can get low pressure. And it looks like that's going to happen this weekend somewhere just south of Louisiana. Now, our models disagree on how organized it could get. The European model just has the remnants of that cool front and a weak area of low pressure forming and some rain around. The GFS is much more organized and it has a well-defined low pressure south of Louisiana, bringing in a couple days of heavy rain. This is not going to be moving very quickly, and both models show a slow-moving system, but this is going to create a wet Sunday, and I think at the end of the day, Sunday is going to be rather gloomy here along the northern Gulf in Louisiana and maybe Mississippi. We'll need to follow this closely to see how much this low pressure tries to form. Again, not really going to be a tropical system, but low pressure equals rain, maybe some gustier winds, and higher than normal tides. It's just a preliminary outlook, but that's what we're going to be following as we head into this upcoming weekend. And again, I think Sunday could end up being somewhat of a gloomy day. We'll be ironing out the details here. There's still a lot of unknowns with how this plays out, but that's what I'm seeing right now with what we're going to be watching this weekend in the northern Gulf. That's going to do it for your tropical weather impact on this Wednesday, October the 29th. Thank you so much for joining me.